Let's go to John chapter 1. We are moving through the Gospels, seeing what the writers of each book of the Gospel is wanting us to see about Jesus. And obviously we started in the book of Matthew, and Matthew's focus was for us to see Jesus as the King, the Messiah. So Matthew, as we already saw, the genealogy that he gives goes back to David and Abraham, and that's where it stops, because that's all he's trying to prove. He's trying to prove that Jesus was a Jew, but not only a Jew, but a descendant of the great King David. So by blood, he was the proper heir to the throne. And so this was for the Jews who were having doubts that this was the Messiah. Matthew was trying to help those doubting Jews, or those curious Jews, to be able to see that this is the Messiah, or was the Messiah that we were waiting for. For us, it helps us to be able to see him as just king of our life. And so we talked about how he fills that role. And then we go to the book of Mark, and Mark is the shortest of all of them. And Mark helps us to see Jesus in the first half of his book in the authority and power. And in the second half of his book, he wants us to see Jesus as that humble, meek servant. So two kind of different spectrums of Jesus here, but he wants us to see that full picture of how he looks there. And then, of course, last week we looked at the book of Luke, and Luke's focus is for us to understand that Jesus was fully man. So he gives a genealogy the same way that Matthew did, but Luke goes all the way back to Adam, because that's what he's trying to get across to us. He's trying to help get anybody who would look at Jesus as just a myth or a folklore or something like that. He's proving that no, he truly did exist. He was fully man. He was born. He lived the full human life. But Luke even documented Jesus's teenage years, so that we would know that he didn't just appear at 30 years old and start ministry. Like, he was fully human. And this is important because nowadays, there's no way that anyone can deny the existence of Jesus. There's no way that you can accurately study history and come to the conclusion that Jesus never existed. It's already been proven. He literally did walk this earth. Even by secular historians documented that he was truly here. And so we take that understanding from the book of Luke, and I think it's just such a neat transition into the book of John. Now, John is, in my opinion, different than any of the other three Gospels. Not contradictory type different, but just it's different in the way that it feels. If you read the book of John and you've read the other three Gospels, you might come to the same conclusion, that it's just got a different feel to it. Because of all of the Gospels, John is the one with the most firsthand eyewitness testimony. So, we know that Matthew, he has a lot of firsthand eyewitness testimony of Jesus, but Mark was too young to go with Jesus at the time of his ministry, but he did know Jesus, and Jesus did know him, but he was just too young to travel with him. But we know that Mark's source of information for his book was Peter. And Peter, if you're going to have a source, that was a fantastic source to have. Luke as well, he documented some of the things, but he wasn't there all the time. But John was. John's there for the full shebang. And so the things that he's going to write in his book are probably the most collection of eyewitness accounts on hand. And so John's book is just different in the way he writes. But John, he starts his book out different as well. There's no birth story. There is a genealogy, but it's not an earthly genealogy. It has nothing to do with who begat who and who the mom was or who the dad was. It's nothing really about earth necessarily at all. And that's because what John wants us to see about Jesus is that he was the Son of God. So John's whole book is focused very specifically on Jesus and who he was as divine Son of God. So John is not interested in trying to prove to anybody that he was fully human. He's not trying to prove that he was fully king or anything like that, though he does do those things like everybody else. But his main focus is, I want you guys to walk away seeing that this was not just a guy, this was not just a prophet, this was not just a teacher, this was God in the flesh. And that's John's focus. That's what he wants to get across to us throughout his book. And so more than likely, I love the book of John, so more than likely we may be here for a couple of weeks in the book of John, just because there's so much cool stuff that he talks about in his book. But I want to start in John chapter 1, verse 1. Very, very well-known section of verses here. We quote these a lot. So John chapter 1, starting in verse 1, it says this: "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." And then we want to skip down to verse 14. It says, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth." So this is we quote these verses all the time, but I want to go back through these things to see and show you what exactly John is the picture he's trying to get us to see, to know Jesus just a little bit better in this aspect. But he starts out in the beginning. Now, when you hear in the beginning, what do you think of? Anybody go back to Genesis? Anybody thinking creation when you see the words in the beginning? And that's the point. John's trying to take us back to creation, but he's actually going further back than that. But see, we can't go further back than that, because it was at creation that we know that the earth was created, animals were created, people were created. We know all of that stuff happened at created, but creation is also the first time that time is relevant. Anything before creation, there's no time. Okay? So for us, so basically, if there's no time, there's no beginning, right? There's no starting point if there's no boundary of time. Now, take my word for it. You may be smarter than me, and I'm not going to argue that. But I have spent so much time of my life trying to understand that. How there's not a beginning and an end when time's not a factor. Our brains, or at least mine, just struggles with that concept. But that's the reality, that before creation, time is just not a thing. And so, but it was at creation. So in the beginning, for us, we can only fathom Genesis. But John's actually going to take us pre-Genesis, before the creation story. In the beginning was the Word. The fact that he uses the word "was" is important, because what he's trying to indicate here with the word was that the Word existed at the time of creation. It didn't start at the time of creation. It was already there. This is important because throughout history, there have been a number of different religions that have tried to portray Jesus as the fact that he was created when the Father created everything else. That Jesus is a created being like people and animals. And so Jesus began when the Father created him in the beginning. But if you read John chapter 1 closely, you see that that's what he's disputing here, saying that's not the case. In the beginning was the Word, that when beginning began, the Word was already there. That's what John's trying to get across to us. Jesus didn't start in Genesis. He was already here when Genesis started. So in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The word "with" is our next thing we want to look at, because "with" is interesting. A lot of people would read that and just think that is denoting Jesus' location, his physical location, to say that he was with God. And so if we would see a picture in our minds that at creation, we would think that just means that Jesus was there with the Father. He was present. But that's not really, it obviously does that, but that word "with" actually is a word that is defined as to be in agreement with, to cooperate with, and to face and work towards with. What it means is be the same thing as this. It's like if, let's say, me and Monroe was at Walmart and somebody was going to try to mug us in the parking lot, and we get surrounded by a band of thugs. And I'm looking at Monroe and be like, man, we're going to have to fight our way out of this. And I say, Monroe, are you with me? Now, I'm not asking, is he physically with me? That's obvious. What I'm asking with him is, are you going to fight with me so that we can get out of this thing? It's a request or a recognition of agreement, that we're in cooperation here, that we're together in this thing. Or if you were to go in business with somebody or had a great idea, say, are you with me in this? I mean, do you agree with me in this? Are you committed to this with me? And then the word is connected also toward the fact that we are towards, both agreeing to work towards a common goal. So to say that the Word was with God, it's obvious that Jesus was present. That doesn't really need to be argued. But he's saying he wasn't just there. He was cooperating, working with the Father, alongside the Father, towards a common goal, and that common goal was creation. So nowhere in this is John even hinting that Jesus was made by the Father and then started. He's saying, no, he was there with the Father in the beginning, and they were both working together in creation. So this is all necessary because all of this stuff is going to just magnify and help us understand even more the divine nature of Jesus. It says that the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So right now, if we hadn't had read verse 14, and I know it's spoiler alert, you guys have already read that, you already know that Jesus is God, but if you hadn't, you might be asking, say, okay, this word seems pretty important. This word was in the beginning. This word was with God, working with God, and involved in the creation story. But not only that, this word was God. So who is the Word? Well, verse 13 says the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So we know the Word was Jesus. But why is he being defined as the Word? Why does the writer, why is John calling Jesus the Word? Well, that's where we start to understand why that may not sound like a cool title to have, but that's a really cool title to have. To be identified as the Word of God. The Word was with God. The Word was God. So when we think of that, we have to understand, first of all, what words are. Just words in general. Jesus taught us in the Gospels, he said that out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. He says the good that is stored up in a man's heart, that good will come out. If there's evil stored up in that man's heart, that evil will come out. So we know that words can be indicators of what's going on in here. Proverbs teaches us that the power of life and death is found on the end of the tongue. So what words are, technically speaking, are the manifestations or the embodiments of the heart. Words allow you to see and understand and know what's going on in my heart by the way that whatever it is that I say. So if I'm angry and I say words, you see what I'm thinking. You are able to perceive and understand what I'm thinking by the words that I use. Words are interesting things because they're not physical. We can't hold on to them. We can't touch them. But yet, you can be held accountable for them just like you can your actions. Right? You can say something and be held accountable and punished for things that you say just like you can for things that you do. But you can't see them, you can't hold them, you can't touch them, but yet you said them. Words can cause things to be built up or tore down. You don't have to physically touch anything. Just a word has the powerful ability to do those things. So words are interesting in the sense that they don't have any real tangible quality about them, but yet at the same time, they are powerful though. They're not just in the air. They have the ability to move and sway and build up and tear down. We can be held accountable for them, just like we can our physical, tangible actions. So there's something very unique about our words But if we look at them as the manifestation, they are that part of what's actually going on in us that you can't see, but yet words allow you to be able to see. You guys can't read my mind, and I can't read your mind. But I can open my mouth and tell you what I'm thinking, and my words allow you to see what's going on in here. In Proverbs chapter 23, there's a verse that everybody, in my opinion, misuses. Proverbs chapter 23, verse 7 is talking, and it's the King James Version that most people misuse. Now, if I read it to you right here in ESV, it doesn't make as much sense. It says, "For he is like one who is inwardly calculating. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you." Now, the King James Version is what most people quote that says, "As a man thinks, so he is." And I've heard loads of people take that verse and try to use it as a motivational quote to say that it's the power of whatever you're thinking, that's the direction you're going to go, that's what you're going to become. It's all in the power of what you're thinking. Now, I do agree with that, but that's not what that verse is saying. I do agree with the sense that if you're thinking negatively all day and you're thinking, sinful stuff all day, that's going to sway you towards that direction. If you're thinking life and you're thinking praise and the truth of the Word of God, that's going to sway you that direction. But right here, the context is he's saying to be careful about who invites you into their house. And they tell you to sit down, and they say, eat all you want, drink all you want, man, have a good time. But inwardly, they're adding up your tab. Inwardly, they're adding up your bill to be able to hold it against you later. So he's saying, be careful when you go into the house of these folks that if you go in hungry with your guard down, they're going to take advantage of you. Even though they say to you, eat and drink, everything is fine, it says in his heart, he is not with you. So if we take that, we understand that there are times where words can be faked. But the way that Jesus taught us, he says that you will know a tree by its fruit. It only takes a matter of time before someone's true beliefs, their true opinions, their true perspective is going to come forth. I can fake it. I can put on a show for a little while, but eventually something's going to happen, and how I really feel in here will manifest in my words. So if we take words to be that, they are the embodiment, the manifestation of the heart. They are also very distinct to me. My words are my words. How many times have you guys quoted somebody? Where you say, you give the quote and you said, and that was said by Mark Twain. I can echo your words, but it will always be your words originally. I can say, Joel told me this. I echoed it, but those words originated from the heart of Joel. So our words are distinct to us. You can echo them words, but they originated from my heart. So they are the embodiment and they are distinct. Now, if we take all of that information and we come back to Jesus, he's the Word. What does that mean? Let's go to Hebrews chapter 1. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3. If you've got your Bibles, I would encourage you to highlight this verse because this is one that I go back to a lot. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3. He, talking about Jesus, is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature. And he upholds the universe by the word of his power. After making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. What he basically says here is that Jesus was the exact representation of the Father. So by him being the Word, just like our words are distinct and our words reveal the heart, and our words are the embodiment of what is going on in the heart that is invisible. You remember Jesus said that the Father is spirit, The Father is invisible, but guess what the Son is not? The Son's not invisible. He is the embodied Word of the heart of God. Jesus is that physical thing that we can look at and say, that is the heart of my God. Just like my words will reveal my heart, Jesus revealed the heart of God. He was that substance. He was that evidence. He was that fingerprint that Hebrews is just talking about there, that distinctly identifies and reveals the heart of God. It's not just about things that he says. It's everything about who he is. That when we look at him, we know that is the heart of God right there. So now when Jesus says things like, I don't say anything except for what the Father tells me to say. I don't do anything except for what I've seen the Father do. That we know that there is absolutely no difference between the Father and the Son. That every single thing Jesus done was to reveal to us the heart of God. This is powerful because there is a ton of stuff, a ton of things, guys, that Christians in this world believe that does not agree with the example that Jesus gave us. Ton of stuff. I hear people all the time believe that what they believe about the heart of God is correct, yet it's a polar opposite of what we saw in Jesus. I have people that believe that it's impossible to understand and fully know the heart of God, yet ignore the example that Jesus gave. And I'm like, have you not read about Jesus? Because that's what he is. You're acting like knowing our God is impossible, yet we have the example, the perfect example in the Word, Jesus himself. That have you not? That's the heart right there. That's your God. You don't need to look at Jesus and say, wow, his life was really, I see people that read about Jesus and talk about Jesus and the mercy that he showed, yet will disagree when I tell them that God has mercy for them. No, you misunderstand. What Jesus is showing you is the mercy of God towards you. Don't just read these stories in the Bible and say, wow, that's fascinating, that's amazing, but not receive it for what it is. This is God speaking to you saying, this is who I am. This is me. Bill Johnson said something years ago that has been ingrained into my mind, and I'll never forget it. I don't ever want to forget it. And he said, anything that you believe about God that you did not see in Jesus, you need to question. And I have thought about that, I don't know how many times, about things that I have believed about God that I did not learn from Jesus. If I didn't learn it from Jesus, I probably need to question that idea. Because he's the Word. He is the embodiment of the heart of God. He is that aspect of God that is invisible and that is spirit, yet Jesus is the embodiment of that, to where we can look at it, we can see it, we learn from it, we follow the example. He is why, that's why it says in the Word was God, because that's who he is. He is God here. And the Word became flesh, and it dwelt among us. We've talked about this some in our midweeks of, there's times in the Old Testament, like for example with Abraham, where Jesus would appear and he would walk with Abraham. He ate dinner with Abraham, and Abraham even washed his feet. So he was physically there, but yet it's different than what we have in the New Testament where he comes in the flesh. He's physically present in the Old Testament, but once he came and delivered the message that he came to deliver, he was gone. Back into the spirit realm, he was gone. But yet when he came in the flesh, as Luke helps us understand, he didn't go back and forth between the spirit realm and physical realm. He was here, fully here, never leaving, just right here, walking. He was abiding by time like everybody else. He walked everywhere that he went like everybody else. He was fully here. And that's why John says he became flesh. Not just here physically, he became flesh. He was really here, the way Luke just got done explaining. And we have seen his glory, the glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. We have seen his glory. John is trying to get it across to us super, super clear that, look, guys, was he a prophet? Yes. Teacher? Yes. Awesome friend and person? Yes. All these things? Yes. But do not walk away from this not understanding that he was divine. This was God in the flesh that we were dealing with here. It is so important that we understand this because, as we said earlier, throughout time, there have been numerous doctrines out there that have tried to eliminate Jesus as God. There's loads of religions out there that will say, oh, he was a great teacher. He was a fantastic prophet. He was a fantastic this or fantastic that. But when you say, well, do you believe that he was God? That's when they start to stutter and step back. But it is super, super important, guys, that we understand who our Jesus is. And when you go back up to verse 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. You may ask yourself, why did John say in verse 2 the same thing he just got done saying in verse 1? Because verse 2 is just a short, condensed version of what he said in verse 1. And many believe, and I tend to agree, that he's trying to protect the doctrine of truth that is found in verse 1 to make it abundantly clear that Jesus is not a created being, that he is the creator. He is the one who spoke these things into existence. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Now, I don't know how much clearer you can get than that. Because we're talking of things here, again, we're talking about creation outside of the realm of time. We're talking obviously about the creation story that we find in Genesis where, you've got the earth and plants and animals and all that kind of stuff. But we know also that angels, they're created beings. And the angels were there at the creation story because the book of Job says that they rejoiced when God is laying the foundations of the earth. So we're talking about the fact that there was creation happening through Christ before any of this stuff ever came to be. He's been here, man. He's the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, who is not bound by beginning and end. He is outside of the realm of time. And this is so important because when we go back and we take all four of these Gospels together, guys, you start to see who your Messiah is, who your Lord and Savior really is. If you need to understand him as your king, as your leader, as the authority in your life, Matthew's going to help you get there. Matthew's going to help you understand what it is to see him as a king. If you remember, we talked about that. He's not the king we expected to get. He's not a king of wrath and punishment and condemnation and shame. He's a king of love and mercy and patience and grace. So he's a king that we did not even perceive we were worthy of, yet it's what we were given. If you need to understand Jesus and his miracle working power and his ability to drive away demons or to heal the sick or the lame to walk, Mark's going to help you understand that. Anytime that I'm trying to study about healing or whatever, Mark's the book that I'm going to because Mark details that stuff far more than anybody else does. But at the same time, Mark is there to say, but look, it ain't just about walking in power and authority. It's also about being meek and humble and serving. So Mark helps us understand kind of how we are to follow, what example it looks like for us to follow on a day-to-day basis. But if you need to understand Jesus as relatable to you and what you're going through, if you need to understand how can Jesus understand what it's like to be me, how can Jesus understand what it's like to deal with betrayal and stress and anxiety and all the things that this world throws at us, you need to read Luke and understand that he was a man. You need to read Luke and understand that he dealt with all the stuff in this world that you and I deal with. But it's the way that he responded to it that we are admiring and receiving and following. He didn't bow to it. He didn't give to it. Though he was fully man, he rose above it and showed us how to walk in authority over these things. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't understand. He knows exactly what it's like to deal with the stuff that you deal with. Luke helps you get there. But if you need to just stand there and be in awe of who he is as the creator, God, John's your man. John's the man that's going to bring you into this place. And guys, we're going to look at some stuff probably next week that is just flat out awesome to me. about the prophecies and how things that Jesus did that a lot of times we read right past and don't even notice. John's a really, really cool book. But if you need to just stand there and worship him as God, John is the book to help you get there to say, man, he is so divine, so awesome, so amazing. The creator of the universe. You know, just really, really amazing stuff. And one of the things that John does throughout his book that is different is every time Jesus does a miracle or something like that, John does not use the same terminology. Everybody else uses the term like miracle or authority or sign and wonder or some sort of big word that is kind of like, wow. John doesn't do that. John just uses works. Simple word. Works or sign. Those are his two most common words that he uses to describe Jesus casting out demons or healing the sick or the lame walking or resurrecting the dead. He'll either use work or sign. Not a real flattering word, not a real attention-getting word. Why? Because when the creator of the universe heals somebody that is sick, does that shock you? Does it? Be honest. If the creator of the universe, who spoke everything into existence, healed somebody in front of you, would it surprise you? Would you go, whoa, I didn't see that coming? No. You'd be like, oh, well, yeah, I kind of figured he could, you know? If an evil spirit rose up and tried to stand toe-to-toe up against the creator of the universe, who all things were made by him, through him, and for him, and an evil spirit that was created, that fallen angel was made by him, tries to rise up in his face, and Jesus overcome him, does that surprise you? No. And it didn't surprise John either. So John, writing to help us understand the divine nature of Jesus as God, uses words like work or sign because he's like, guys, this is God we're talking about. It's not really surprising. This is a work. This is just him being him, man. Like, this is not, I mean, is it amazing? Yeah. But when you look at who it's coming from, you expected nothing else. He just marks it up as a work, just a work of God, or a sign that he was God. So I think little things like that, little details like that are just really, really cool because it just magnifies Jesus, man. It shows us how big he is. And when you're going through stuff and you're dealing with things in this world, that's where your mind needs to be, is on how big your God is and exactly who your God is. And it completely changes your perspective about the trials and things that you're going through. Father, we bless you. We love you. Jesus, we just stand in all of you. We are amazed. And to understand there's more detail about who you are. Lord, I just pray that we all in this room, as Andrew mentioned earlier, there's who knows what all kind of stuff everybody here is dealing with and what they're going through. But God, I'm just asking this morning for us to understand and be able to perceive the way John did. To be able to see the things, to see you like he did. Like, you're God. You are above all of this stuff. And if I take that information coupled with everything else the other authors of the gospel have done, you're not just God, like you're my God. You are my Savior. You are my King, my teacher, my friend. It's just such a connection there, Lord, that I think gets lost a lot of times. Is we may want to admire you, but we do it so far away. But Lord, through these Gospels, it just becomes paramount that not only do we acknowledge and understand who you are, but we see how close you are to us, how much you care for us and love us. And God, I pray for anybody in this room that thinks that they have to deal with what they're dealing with by themselves, because they don't. Lord, you love them. You've got victory, provision. You've got help for them, Lord. It's just, you're there for them. You are. That's part of why you're their God. You're not just God, you're their God, my God. Lord, I pray that sinks into us and it changes the way that we perceive our life and our value and your love, and just everything changes because of that. Jesus, we bless you. You are the Word. You are the embodiment, the exact imprint of the heart of God, Lord, and we're just so grateful this morning. We just ask you just to stir and move us, bring us where we need to be, work in us, convict, heal, encourage, whatever needs are present this morning, God. We ask you just to stir and move amongst the room. Lord, we love you so much. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.